Hey class, so we're back and I just wanted to show you how to make looping animations from your backgrounds. I did make a few adjustments to my different layers. I have this initial grass layer, and then my grassy knoll was getting a little wonky, so I decided to try it one more time. So basically I'm just going to click and drag with my pen tool. And then there's a couple ways to go about this, but basically you want the very start and the end points to be at the same level. So I did drag down a guide from the rulers, and let me hide these guides, and make sure that these 2 points are on the same level. I'm also making this grassy knoll a little shorter because it's not going to move that far. As comparison to my little individual grass pieces, which will be moving at a faster pace. So just going to work on that. I added a paint bucket tool, and then I'm just kind of clipping off any of the excess so that I have a nice start and finish to this grass piece. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect, but if you can get them so it's close, you won't have any popping or jumping in your scene. All right, so now that I have this whole piece, I'm just going to align it with the very front of the frame. And then my city itself is not going to move. My sky is not going to move, just my grassy knoll and my grass, and then my person. Okay, let's move on to the next piece. So the key to an effective looping animation is that the start point and the loop point need to be at the same level. So for example, with our grassy knoll, we're going to start here, and then we're going to start our loop here. So when we're actually moving our piece across, it needs to start at this point and end at this point at some range of frames. So let's see, I'm just going to back up here and grab my grassy knoll, and I'm going to click and drag to make sure everything's selected because it does have a pen outline. And then what I'm going to do is just press Alt or the Option key and click and drag it over. And I'm going to hold down Shift 2 to make sure that it snaps. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so now I know that it needs to reach this kind of divot point to create an effective loop. All right, next piece will be the same with these grass pieces. Because these grass pieces are going to be moving so much faster, they also need to start here, and then I will create a copy and loop it here. So let's do that. I'm just going to go to lock my knoll and grab my individual grass pieces, click and drag, hold down spacebar so I can move my frame around, and hold down Alt, click, and Shift, and that will drag these over. Okay. So I know I need to get this initial grass piece back to this spot. All right, so now to make these pieces move, we are going to use Adobe Animate's classic tween capabilities. So to create a classic tween, it's a two-step process. First, your item or your graphic must be a symbol. A symbol is a container that contains your graphics and then lives in your library, which makes it a reusable piece that you can use in other scenes or multiple times in this particular scene. So a symbol is a really powerful tool. There's 3 types of symbols. So I'm just going to grab, let's lock and hide my individual grass pieces, and I'm going to just grab my knoll. So I'm going to click and grab my entire grassy knoll. There's a couple ways to make symbols, and I'll show you the fast way to do it in a second. But the most straightforward is to go to Modify, Convert to Symbol. You can also use the shortcut F8. Additionally, you can right-click on the object and select Convert from Symbol, Convert to Symbol there. So I'm going to call this null. And there's 3 types of symbols. We are 99% of the time going to be using a graphic symbol in this class, but let's just talk about the other 2 types. So a button is only useful in HTML5 canvas types, which we're not using, but it will make your symbol interactive. So that's kind of an interesting option for the future if you are using Animate to make HTML5. Movie clips are very similar to graphic symbols. However, they can contain more complicated information. As such, they don't actually play in your active viewport, so you can't preview them without actually creating a movie file, hitting this play button, and creating an SWF file. So they're useful. There are a few more capabilities with them, but for 99% of our purposes, let's stick with graphic. We're going to save this to our library root folder. However, eventually, if you need to create multiple folders to manage your symbols, you can do that too. Okay, so I'm just going to hit OK. And you can see instantly that my symbol is now contained in a box. And this point in the center is actually the pivot point. So if you're going to be using and rotating this symbol in the future, you can actually rotate around this pivot point, or you can move your pivot point. That can be useful when creating things like ears on a character, etc. All right, so now that I have my symbol, I can actually create a classic tween with it. So the biggest thing I need to do is figure out how many steps it's going to take for my character to go from here all the way to this repeating point. I'm thinking it's probably going to take 3 or 4 cycles, so I'm just going to actually, you know what, I'm going to turn my, it's okay, I'm going to turn my walk into a symbol itself. So if you go to your actual layer, because I want to convert all of these points to a symbol, and let's see, just to double check, I have 32 frames right now. So that means that includes 2 full cycles of steps. So I can convert this into a symbol. So let's right click, and I'm going to convert my layers to symbol. And I'm going to call this walk and hit OK. And now you can see this is a new container. But if I hit play, my single frame symbol here is now playing over 32 frames. If I want to examine the symbol itself, I could double click on it, and you can see I'm opening it in my scene here as like a sub piece, a sub container. And you can see here that I have my whole timeline inside this container. All right. So I'm thinking this is probably going to take us, rather than 32, I'm going to drag this out to 74. There we go. And my city, let's drag this piece out as well, unlock it. So I think my whole animation here is probably going to be 74 frames. Click, drag out to 74. My sky, same thing. Okay. And my grassy knoll. So I know between this frame, and by the 74th frame, so I'm going to also grab this grassy knoll and drag it out. So I know at the 74th frame, I want this to complete this loop. So I'm just going to create a new keyframe with the black dot in it. I'm going to highlight everything. Oh, sorry. Before that, I'm going to grab my grassy knoll and I'm going to try and drag so this divot point, or the looping point, is moved to the front of this. So let's just move that. There you go. And that divot point, I got to say, is pretty convenient. And it also is convenient that now this is part of my this center point, so it snaps really easily. Now I can click and grab my entire timeline here. I'm going to right click, so that's Control and click in the timeline, and create classic tween. Bam. And you'll see that this turns purple and there's an arrow from frame 1 all the way to the end where we can see our animation has been created. And if I scrub through this, you can see that Animate has calculated for us the amount of time that this grassy knoll needs to move. Perfect. Next, we're going to do the exact same thing, but with our individual grass. So let me show that and go back to my first frame. And so what I have said is that we're going to go from this. Let me lock all these other pieces. Lock this. Okay. So the individual grass, what we're going to do is go from this piece to this piece in 70 frames. So let's extend this out. So I'm just going to click and also click and drag to extend it so it's the same. And then in this last frame, I'm going to add a keyframe. And for this position, I need to focus on getting this over here. Oh, but I have not created my symbol yet. So we can actually do that at the same time as creating our classic tween. So that's the shortcut. This used to not be possible, but now it is. So I'm going to go to my last frame. I'm going to click and drag this guy, hold down Shift, and just drag it so that it lines up with this first frame. So it's basically in the same position that it was. All right, so I have 2 frames, one here, one here. Click, Shift click the entire timeline. And now if I do Control and create a classic tween, it is going to ask me in a separate window that I've got to drag over here to show you. It says selected frame spans cannot be tweened. You must convert frame content to a symbol in order to tween. Do you want to convert it and create a tween? Well, yes, we do, in fact. Now you do have to be careful here because it did not label our tween. So I'm just gonna right click this and call it grass. So I'm just going to zoom in here and hit play. Now it does seem like our grass and our knoll are moving kind of closer together than I would like. So I'm just going to show you how you would fix that. So one way of adjusting this speed would be to change the length of the grass. So make it wider, so that the first movement here syncs up with maybe an item somewhere out here. So that would be probably a good fix. Alternately, I'm just going to try and double time this. So basically, I'm just going to grab all my frames here. So I'm going to click and drag, and I believe it is 37. That should get me to this point. And then I'm going to do Alt and click and drag to duplicate that timeline again. So we'll see a little bit of a jump. Cool. So let's zoom in. and hit return. There we go. So now the grass is moving at a different speed, the knoll is moving at a different speed, and my city and background are staying the same. All right, so that's a little brief introduction into symbols, graphic symbols, and classic tweens. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks, class.